The King's Report News Hour. For a minute there, I wasn't sure. King's Report News Hour for the 12th day in the 9th month, according to the heavenly calendar, in the 16th year of Changi. Timur sitting in for the second king of Changi. And so, yes, on the solar calendar, of course, we're now in November. November, yes. Time is just moving right along, isn't it? Okay, let's look at the kingdom, what's going on there at 36 degrees right now at the Tongpyeong, Tennessee. Partly cloudy, and today getting up to 58 degrees, some sun, then turning cloudy. Tonight, 45 for a low. Cloudy, a couple of showers this evening, followed by occasional rain and drizzle late. Father's hometown, Cheongju, North Pyongan province, in what is today North Korea. Clear and 42 right now, and getting down to 32. Mainly clear tonight, and then tomorrow mostly sunny, breezy, and cooler, high of 45. And it says here, looking ahead at noticeably cooler weather on the way Sunday. All right. And then at the Chunibun Palace in northeast Pennsylvania, 41 degrees and clear. Windy with partial sunshine today, 55 degrees for a high tonight, partly cloudy, low of 34. And County, Texas, 46 and partly cloudy. High of 71 today, variable clouds with a thunderstorm in parts of the area. Getting down to 43 tonight, clear and chilly. The Suncheon Palace in Korea, 55 and clear right now, and clear to partly cloudy tonight, low of 47. Tomorrow breezy with plenty of sunshine, high of 62. Gunma Palace is in Japan, currently 62 and clear, and remaining clear tonight and getting down to 49, and a high of 70 tomorrow. Pleasant sun in areas of high clouds in the morning, then mostly sunny in the afternoon. And then in Guangdong province, 79 and overcast right now, less humid sun, and let's see, let's remember to update this. Okay, 77 right now, 77 and overcast right now, and partly cloudy tonight, getting out to 70 degrees. Tomorrow, rather cloudy, high of 78. Okay, take a look at Father's Word. Where are we today? Let's see here. Today we're in the book on the life of true filial piety. So Father says here, this is a quote in a speech from July 1st, 1990. Father says, quoting says, if someone says, I am a filial child, and this is what I do in order to be a filial child, that is a fake filial child. 가짜 효자입니다. 위하고 잊어버릴 수 있는 사람이 효자의 반열에 들어갑니다. So the person who lives for the sake of others and then forgets or does not keep an account, I would say, does not keep an account of what he has done, is the person who will join the ranks of the filial children. Okay, so if you hear someone boasting, I am the filial child, well, not really. Not really. All right, so let's go and see what is happening now. And today I want to go to this thing that happened during the recent sort of hullabaloo surrounding APEC. And I don't know if it got a whole lot of press, but when I actually was, I think I was tuning into it live when I heard South Korean President Lee Jae-myung speaking with President Donald Trump, and just right there in front of all the cameras, asking President Trump for permission for South Korea to build a nuclear submarine. And I'm thinking, well, wait a second, this has got to be staged because there's no way that he would make such um, a high stakes uh, request in public. There's no way that he would make such a request if there was a possibility that President Trump would say no, right? And frankly, this thing about having a nuclear submarine is something that the Koreans have been pursuing permission to build a nuclear submarine, have been pursuing for the past 30 years. And they need U.S. Permission for this because of the technology, for one thing, has to come, some of the technology has to come from the U.S. And so far, the U.S. has only shared this technology with the UK and Australia. So it was a high stakes request there. If it really was kind of uh, unrehearsed, shall we say, or not agreed to previously in private. But that may be exactly what happened here. And I find that very, very interesting. Anyway, I have a couple of articles on that right now. And well, first, I want to say that I disagree with the uh, everyone that I've read so far on this issue. Um, I think we need to remember that Lee Jae-myung is not a friend of the United States. In his heart, he is not an ally of the United States. In his heart, he is an ally or friend of North Korea, and he is a ally or friend of China. So what is a guy like this doing, asking the U.S. for permission or pursuing the whole idea of South Korea building a nuclear submarine? Well, at the same time that he's doing this, he's also pursuing another goal, which is to um, have the operational or wartime operational control of the South Korean military transferred from the United States to Korea. Right now, since the Korean War, the United States has had wartime operational control of the Korean military. It used to have peacetime operational control as well. Peacetime operational control was transferred, can't remember when, was anyway, some time back. It's been a while now. But wartime operational control still belongs to the United States. In other words, if there is a war, the United States and the Pentagon and whoever is the commander of the UN force of the U.S. forces, right now it's the Eighth Army in Korea, would have also command of the South Korean forces. And this issue of transferring wartime operational control has been coming up quite a lot. And actually, previously, the U.S. said, actually, there was a date set, and the U.S. said, okay, let's do it. But South Korea kind of got cold feet at the last minute because that means that they're responsible if they take over operational control of their military. It means they're responsible for the defense of the country. And there was a time when, and I think even now the U.S. is willing to do it. They're just waiting on the South Koreans to come to a point where they feel that they are ready to take over this responsibility. So two things here. So what are those two things leading to? What are those two things leading to? Once he has a nuclear submarine and wartime operational control, what is the next step? Well, the next step will be the removal of U.S. forces from the Korean Peninsula, in my opinion. And I think that is where Lee Jae-myung wants to go. Why? Well, because that will make it much easier than to have talks with North Korea, because that's a major demand of North Korea. And for China as well. China also would like to have U.S. forces removed from the Korean Peninsula. the Korean Peninsula has long been a, or not, well, not so long, but for 100 years or so, uh, has been a sort of a um, you know kind of a pawn, I guess, that anyway that the surrounding countries have always been trying to control. And the Russo-Japanese War was fought over the Korean Peninsula, over control of the Korean Peninsula. The first, I'm sorry, first Sino-Japanese War was fought over the Korean Peninsula. And of course, at the end of World War II, Russia was very happy to sort of come down and occupy the top half, the north half of the Korean Peninsula, take control of that. But then they established their puppet regime and withdrew. And the U.S. came in. Of course, Japan in the first half of the 20th century, because they defeated both Russia and China over in those two wars over the Korean Peninsula, uh, uh, took control of the Korean Peninsula for the first half of the century. And so China would certainly like to see the U.S. withdraw its forces from the Korean Peninsula, because that would automatically, I think, help China increase its influence over the peninsula, especially if someone like Lee Jae-myung, a leftist like Lee Jae-myung, is in the uh, in the president's office. Right now, Lee Jae-myung is saying that he would like to get operational control of his military by 2030, which is what? Well, that's when his term of president ends. So, so we'll see. The removal of U.S. forces cannot happen, I don't think, before that. But after that, I think after 2030, probably all bets are off in terms of the presence of U.S. forces on the Korean Peninsula. In my opinion, all right, in my opinion. All right, so let's see what people are saying about this. Let's see here. Let's see. Where? Okay, okay. Yes. So this first article is an opinion article, happens to be published by UPI. And well, normally I wouldn't, give UPI the uh, benefit of our platform, but anyway, because it is owned by the Preston Group or the Quack Group. Okay. But anyway, this particular opinion piece, I think, does deserve our attention. And this is written by Nosok Che, who, one second here. Okay. Let me just tell you who he is before we read it. Former chief editor of the Kyoyang Shinmun. Kyoyang Shinmun is one of the six, I guess, sort of newspapers that have been published in Korea, national newspapers that have been published in Korea um, since the 1960s or so, and former Paris correspondent also. So he's a former foreign correspondent, which means that he has some kind of a global outlook, I suppose. He currently serves as president of the Korean Shinmun Alumni Association, president of the Korean Media and Cultural Forum, and CEO of the YouTube channel One World TV. All right, so let's take a look at this guy and his opinion. All right, so let's ignore the UPI byline there. President Trump, I ask you to make a bold decision so that South Korea can receive fuel for nuclear-powered submarines. When President Lee Jae-myung suddenly uttered those words during the second U.S.-Korea summit in Gyeongju on Wednesday, many Koreans watching the live TV gasped. So let's bring this up a bit. What startled him even more than the bold ask was his reasoning. Lee explained that diesel-powered submarines have limited underwater endurance, restricting our ability to track North Korean and Chinese vessels, and that if South Korea deployed nuclear-powered submarines, it would also substantially reduce the operational burden on U.S. forces. So President Trump is listening to this and he's thinking, yeah, okay, yeah, reducing operational burden in U.S. forces, that sounds good. But Donald, come on. Don't you see what he's doing? Don't you, aren't you reading between the lines? He's saying reduce the need for U.S. forces in Northeast Asia. Don't you see this? This guy, he's he's a snake. You got to understand this. Substantially reduce the operational burden on U.S. forces. Oh man, I mean, he's showing his true colors there. All right, uh, uh, and restricting our ability to track North Korean Chinese vessels. Well, I think Xi Jinping, of course, met with Lee Jae-myung after this, and I doubt that Xi Jinping complained to Lee Jae-myung about this. I doubt very much that Xi Jinping said, "What the heck are you thinking? What do you mean you want to track our submarines uh, or vessels? What do you mean you want to do that?" No, because it's a wink and a nod. All right, it's a wink and a nod. Okay, I understand what you're doing. I understand what you're doing. You're reducing the need for U.S. forces to be in Northeast Asia. Okay, okay, I get it. I get it. That's probably what Xi Jinping is thinking. Okay, I don't know. I think Trump had the wool pulled over his eyes on this one, I'm afraid. And so I think the Pentagon is going to drag its feet on this one, if not walk it back entirely. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. It was by any standard a statement fraught with risk, a security issue so sensitive that every word could be seized upon as a diplomatic provocation. Yet Lee voiced it publicly before an audience that included not only his own citizens, but also the entire watching world. And this is why I find it incredible that there wasn't some sort of prior agreement in private. There must have been, right? Like this guy says, I think Lee Jae-myung, is he really going to risk everything like that? If Trump had said no, it would have been a huge loss of face for him. Anyway, let's see. Among those citizens were progressives critical of the United States, and within that world was China itself. Even so, Lee showed no hesitation. His tone revealed a determined will to press Trump for what he called a bold decision. It was a perilous remark, one that seemed to disregard how his own supporters or his longtime partners in Beijing might interpret it. Yeah, like I say, they're giving him a wink and a nod. Yeah, we understand what you're doing, Mr. Lee. We understand. Yeah, don't worry about us. Yet he nonetheless requested in full view of the public. So I think this guy from Pyongyang Shinmun as well is not really understanding what Lee Jae-myung is trying to do. Yet he nonetheless requested in full view of the public that Washington supply nuclear submarine fuel so that South Korea could track Chinese submarines for extended periods underwater. Anyone can understand why the remark appeared dangerous once Lee's position is taken into account. Lee had invited President Xi Jinping of China to South Korea as a state guest for the Gyeongju APEC summit, the first Korea-China summit in 11 years. And just 2 days before that meeting, he openly sided with Washington, now in strategic confrontation with Beijing, by calling for U.S. assistance on nuclear-powered submarines. What, one wonders, would Xi have thought if he had heard those words? Like I said, she's saying, okay, yeah, I get it, don't worry. In my opinion, I think she is not troubled by this at all. Still, Lee's statement was almost certainly not a spontaneous remark. It bore every sign of careful calculation. Otherwise, he could not have spoken with such conviction and on a domain of the alliance that no previous progressive leader had dared to touch. From the start of his presidency, Lee has signaled that his foreign policy compass is anchored in realism. In his inaugural address, he vowed to strengthen the U.S.-Korea alliance. Well, that's a lie, okay? Deepen trilateral cooperation with Japan. That's a lie. And pursue relations with neighboring powers from the standpoint of national interest and pragmatism. That's true. Okay, so neighboring powers, China and North Korea, but especially China is what he's doing here. Okay, he's not worried about tracking North Korean and Chinese submarines. He's worried about tracking Japanese and American submarines. Is what he's worried about tracking, but he's just not saying it. Skeptics, both in Seoul and Washington, doubted his sincerity, but Lee has stayed the course, even flipping the long-held progressive formula of security with America, economy with China, into a new doctrine, security with America, economy with America. Well, because China's economy right now is in serious trouble, uh, and many Korean firms, including as with many other foreign companies, have been exiting China. During his August visit to Washington, Lee declared it is true that South Korea once relied on the U.S. for security and China for the economy, but that posture is no longer sustainable. That statement came one day after Chinese Ambassador Dai Bing warned that Seoul must demonstrate the wisdom and ability to maintain balanced diplomacy between Washington and Beijing. Yeah, well, of course, an ambassador is always going to say that. Lee's response, firm and immediate, left no doubt about where he stood in an era of escalating U.S.-China rivalry. His position made one thing clear: Seoul's ambiguity was over. Seen in that light, Lee's nuclear submarine request was a logical extension of his declared vision, a reaffirmation of alliance solidarity through tangible deterrence. So I think this guy, although Kyohang Shinmun used to be very or relatively conservative, I would say. It used to be aligned itself with conservative governments, but at least this guy, I think, is not. I think he's aligned with Lee Jae-myung, and that's why he's pretending, or maybe honestly not understanding what Lee is actually trying to do. By signaling a willingness to patrol not only North Korean but potentially Chinese waters with U.S. cooperation, Lee effectively fixed South Korea's coordinates alongside Washington, not Beijing, or pretended to, all right, pretended to, until he gets the submarine, until he gets the fuel. Then let's see what happens. Until he gets the wartime operational control, then let's see what happens. He went further still. During the summit, Lee proposed building multi-nuclear powered submarines armed with conventional weapons, with South Korea covering the entire cost. I say again, this is music to Trump's ears. You're paying for it? Sure, go ahead, knock yourself out, right? The United States, he said, would not need to spend a penny. For Trump, who has promoted an Indo-Pacific containment strategy against China, such an offer was pure strategic gold. But listen, Trump is going to get he's going to be betrayed by Lee Jae-myung. And I think that's pretty clear to some. I hope it's clear to some people in Washington. And maybe this is where Trump is going to regret not having an ambassador in Seoul. He still does not have an ambassador in Seoul, and I think he needs someone who can, whisper in his ear, listen, this guy's a snake. Don't trust him. Some analysts even suggested that Lee's surprise proposal helped break an impasse in the subsequent U.S.-Korea tariff negotiations, which were resolved far more smoothly than expected. Yeah, I think this was Lee Jae-myung's, this was his purpose. He was saying, listen, because this whole $350 billion thing that Korea was saying, listen, we just cannot do that. And America's been saying, you just must do that. And then suddenly it worked out so that $200 billion now is South Korea is going to pay over 10 years, $20 billion a year. And then 150, what is it? I think, shipbuilding they're going to do. And I think probably this nuclear submarine may be part of that shipbuilding cost or that shipbuilding investment. So I think this was exactly Lee Jae-myung's strategy. And so you can see that he's actually pretty smart. He's actually pretty smart. But it's a smart one you got to watch out for. Okay? I think he handled Trump very, very well. Okay? The urgency of Lee's concern is not misplaced. The Yellow Sea or the West Sea, that's the ocean to the west of the Korean Peninsula, has grown perilous since China's 2010 declaration of the area as its internal waters. Beijing has since deployed more than 70% of its maritime buoys near choke points to obstruct Allied naval access. Since 2022, it has erected unapproved metal structures named Shenlan 1 and 2 inside the Provisional Maritime Zone, blocking Korean Coast Guard vessels from approaching. In September, a Chinese warship even chased off a South Korean survey boat in such volatile waters Threats lurk not only above but beneath the surface, making Lee's call for undersea endurance sound less like provocation and more like precaution. Trump's response was swift. Within 24 hours, he posted on Truth Social announcing that the United States had approved South Korea's construction of nuclear-powered submarines to be built at the Philly shipyard. Reuters noted that this was, quote, technology previously shared only with Britain in the 1950s and not even with Australia. Well, I read someplace else that actually they do share it with Australia, so I'm not sure that Reuters is correct on that, but I don't know. Not very many. Only the closest allies receive this technology, and now Trump is giving it to South Korea. So, what is Japan going to say? Right? Me too, of course. Me too. Right? It's obvious what Japan's going to say, right? Um, now all eyes turn to China. As Xi Jinping arrives in Seoul for a long-delayed state visit, friction seems inevitable. Well, actually, I don't think there was that kind of friction. Beijing is expected to raise the nuclear submarine issue and possibly release security and economy with America remarks as provocations. I don't know if he did, yet it is hard to imagine that Lee made his request without a contingency plan in place. Okay. So, yeah, so here came. It's not like, with the THAAD missiles, the anti-missile system that back in 2017, the U.S. Installed this anti-missile system that was aimed ostensibly to counter North Korean missiles that were aimed at South Korea. But China objected strongly because it could also detect missiles that were being fired from China. And so China objected to that very strongly. But I don't think China is making that kind of objection about this. And also, the APEC summit was not a place to bring up sensitive or contentious issues. Let's all get along. Why can't we all live together? This kind of an atmosphere. And China, of course, is trying to project an image of being sort of the benevolent. I don't know what to say. Benevolent, I guess. Benevolent something or other. Dictator. I don't know. Sort of the benevolent superpower, I guess, right? The benevolent regional superpower. And so I don't think that, at least not in public, I don't think Xi Jinping really made a big issue of this whole submarine thing. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens with this. But also here, let's see here. So here, let's also look at this story also on the submarine issue, because this submarine issue is pretty important. I think 50 years from now, if people look back at this APEC summit, they'll remember two things. One is the meeting between Trump and Xi, and the other is this permission for South Korea to build a nuclear submarine, or maybe plural, right? Experts warn that the move could spur China or Japan to accelerate their own nuclear sub programs in return. And this author is writing from Melbourne, Australia. President Donald Trump's announcement that he is approving South Korea to build nuclear-powered submarines in the United States marks a success for Seoul's three-decade effort to acquire nuclear submarines, according to experts. But experts also warn that the move will have geopolitical ramifications, including the possibility that China or Japan could accelerate their own nuclear sub programs in return. And the project faces significant hurdles given the logistics and cost of building nuclear submarines and the lack of clarity around Trump's statement. So the Australians are saying, well, we'll see what happens. Trump's announcement via his Truth Social account comes after South Korean officials have lobbied U.S. administrations for around 30 years to allow the key ally to develop its own nuclear submarines, said Kim Min-sok, a research fellow at only two other countries, the United Kingdom and Australia. So he's writing from Melbourne, so he includes Australia, have gained access to America's highly sought after nuclear sub technology. The strategic environment and threat facing South Korea in recent decades, however, made it difficult to justify Seoul's pursuit of nuclear powered submarines, made it difficult to justify Seoul's pursuit, according to Colin Coe. But that has changed, Coe told Breaking Defense, noting that North Korea has announced its own nuclear powered submarine program. Kim also noted that North Korea has a proven submarine-launched ballistic missile program. Both analysts agreed that South Korea needs submarines that can stay underwater longer to track nuclear, submarine, and missile threats posed by Pyongyang. The decision is also unlikely to sit well with South Korea's other neighbors, particularly China and Japan, said Robert York, the Director for Regional Affairs at the Pacific Forum in Honolulu. Or as Jenny Town, a Korean expert at the Stimson Center, said on X, nothing good will come from the announcement in regional terms. This certainly isn't going to increase stability in the region, that's for sure, Town said. Okay. Tokyo is likely to avoid publicly airing grievances to present a unified strategic front with the US and South Korea, York said, but the move may also push Japan further down the path of pursuing nuclear-powered subs weeks after a government-convened panel reportedly recommended it look at submarines powered by, quote, non-conventional, unquote, propulsion systems. Coe noted that Japanese public concerns about nuclear power may cause domestic political headwinds. Yeah, when it used to be, and I think it still is, maybe not anymore, I don't know. It used to be that every time a U.S. Submarine or warship, aircraft carrier, so forth, that was nuclear powered would visit a Japanese port, the leftists in Japan would have these really strong demonstrations. No, we don't want anything nuclear. No. And of course, this has been the sort of the left. So even of course during the 70s and 80s, remember, the left was against anything nuclear because they wanted only the Soviet Union to have it. I remember that. And then, of course, they always bring up the Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bombs, the atomic bombs, and sort of use that to put the spirit of fear in the hearts of Japanese citizens. So even though Takaichi is a conservative, and I'm sure privately she's saying, oh yeah, this is great. This will give us the excuse to do this as well. But in political terms, especially since she has a minority government, it may be difficult for Takaichi to pursue this, or Japan in general to pursue this anytime soon. China, however, is unlikely to show such restraint, York said, noting Beijing will probably use official and unofficial channels to portray this as more dangerous instigation by the U.S. Cole predicted China will also push ahead with its own nuclear submarine program. China already has a functional nuclear submarine program, and Seoul's decision to develop its own nuke boats will only serve as another strategic justification for it to push on with this area of investment, he said. It is currently unclear what South Korea's nuclear submarine program will look like or what kind of technology transfer may take place. John Wolfthal, a former special assistant on nuclear issues to President Barack Obama, who is now director of global risk at the Federation of American Scientists, said that the structure of the deal will decide if the U.S. Congress has to get involved or not. Right. So in some cases, the Congress will have to pass a law in order for South Korea to get certain technologies. Under the existing nuclear power agreement between the U.S. and South Korea, the transfer of nuclear material to Seoul requires a 90-day review process in Congress, with the ability for a joint resolution to shoot the idea down, Wolfthal said. How do you pronounce that name? So let's leave out the S, Wolfthal. However, if the U.S. is providing the nuclear core for the subs directly without any South Korean involvement, Congress will not necessarily have a role. It's like AUKUS, where we build the subs and the foreign partner doesn't get direct access to the highly enriched uranium, then they don't need congressional authorization. if South Korea is going to enrich their own uranium, which is really what they want, then it has to be approved by Congress, he said. The AUKUS program, through which the U.S. is helping Britain and Australia procure new nuclear submarines, is an obvious point of comparison for the South Korean deal. But while that agreement is leading to the development of a fresh AUKUS class design, the expected size of those boats may not fit South Korea's needs. Instead, Kim believes that a 4,000-ton nuclear-powered version of South Korea's Changbogo 4 class submarine would suit Seoul better than the American Virginia class subs, which he says are too large and expensive. Yeah, because the Yellow Sea, if that's where they're going to be used, is a relatively small lake there, or relatively small sea. So he added that the AUKUS program also includes the transfer of sensitive submarine technology that Washington may not want to share with Seoul, or which Seoul may not feel as necessary. It also means converting the Philadelphia shipyard that is owned by South Korea's Hanwha into America's third nuclear submarine shipyard using Korean budget funds, he added. Right now, Philly is far from prepared for that kind of work, although Hanwha's top defense executive told Breaking Defense earlier this month that the company is planning major investments into Philly while also looking to acquire other shipyards in the U.S. This agreement between South Korea and the U.S. is fundamentally part of making American shipbuilding great again, enhancing U.S. submarine production capacity using South Korea's capabilities, Kim said. Ko agreed, pointing out that it may enable the U.S. to bolster its shipbuilding capacity, address nuclear proliferation risks, and create jobs at home, while South Korea will get the submarine capability it desires. So everybody's happy, right? We'll see. We'll see. It might well, therefore, have been a win-win situation for both parties as a result, Ko said. All right. We will see how this all works out, right? So I guess Philadelphia is going to see some investment. We'll just have to see how that all works out. Okay. All right, so that's so much for the submarine issue. But let's look at the operational control issue. Okay. All right. Okay, let's share this one. And this is a slightly older story, but I think it's good to pair it with this submarine issue. This is a story from back in August, but it sort of pairs with this submarine situation. So here, Lee proposes wartime operational control transfer by 2030, or the end of his term, presumably. Okay? That's when his term ends. Okay? And here, the transition of wartime operational control from the United States to South Korea has been designated as a key national security priority in the Lee Jae-myung administration's 5-year governance plan that was unveiled Wednesday. According to the State Affairs Planning Committee, a de facto transition team tasked with drafting the administration's long-term agenda, the government aims to establish and implement a roadmap for the OPCON transfer during Lee's term. The plan calls for strengthening South Korea's operational planning and command capabilities to enhance deterrence against North Korea, while reaffirming that the transition will proceed in close coordination between the South Korea and U.S. alliance. This has long been a point of discussion between Seoul and Washington, and South Korea has not held wartime operation control of its troops since the outbreak of the Korean War in 1950. Or, that was basically when the South Korea as a country was established in 1948, 2 years prior to that. So pretty much the South Korean military has been under U.S. wartime operational control for its entire history, and even peacetime control for the major part of that history. And that was transferred a couple of decades back, I think. Maybe it was in the 90s or something like that. But anyway, not they were under the U.S. even in peacetime for a long time. 1950, when the authority was relinquished to the United Nations Command, it was later transferred to the South Korea-U.S. Combined Forces Command, which remains under the leadership of a U.S. four-star general. And it's the Eighth Army general that has that leadership. But then the assistant then is always a South Korean general. In 1994, under the liberal Kim Jong-sam administration, South Korea regained peacetime. Okay, thank you. It was in 94. I said it was in the 90s, didn't I? Peacetime operation control. However, wartime command authority continues to reside with the U.S. under the current Combined Forces Command structure, with President Lee is expected to hold his first summit with the U.S. So this was discussed there, and also let's see here. Okay. South Korea war time. I think I saw here that actually the U.S. is very much in favor of this, right? 2 days ago, U.S. Defense Secretary backs South Korea's wartime operational control transfer. So the U.S. has long been in favor of this. Yeah, you guys knock yourselves out. But South Korea has been sort of reluctant. Oh no, we're not ready yet. We're not ready yet. U.S. Defense Chief calls South Korea's push for operational control of forces great. Report, yes, okay. Right. And Hegseth calls South Korea's push for OPCON transfer great, depicts it as combat credible partner. Okay, so anyway, but as I said, I think this is leading up to South Korea saying, okay, that's it. We don't need you anymore. Get out. And U.S. forces would be asked to leave. And if they are asked to leave, they have to leave. Because if South Korea asks, the Philippines, right? The Philippines, way back when, asked the U.S. forces to leave, and they did. Because if you're in a country like that and the government says, please leave, and you don't, then in that moment, U.S. forces become an occupational force, right? If Korea says, we don't want you, or the Philippines says, we don't want you, and the U.S. says, no, we're going to stay, then in that moment, the U.S. becomes an occupying power. So the U.S. will have no choice but to leave once the South Korean government officially asks the U.S. to leave. And I think that may happen, as I said, sometime after 2030, probably not before then. So this is why Xi Jinping keeps saying that that China is patient, because he sees that the flow of history, the tide of history, is in their favor. And of course, the Soviet Union felt the same way. That didn't work out. And well, we'll see. We'll see. I guess it depends on whether God exists or not. If God does not exist, then Xi Jinping is probably right. But if God exists, then I think maybe he's in trouble. We'll see. We'll see. Does God exist? I guess we're about to find out. We're about to find out. Okay. Remember, in Father's list of 6 things that must be in place for there to be a world of peace and unity, number 1 is that everyone in the world must have definite knowledge, or concrete knowledge, or definite knowledge of the existence of God. So maybe Xi Jinping is about to get his epiphany. Whoa! I didn't think that it existed, but it looks like he does. Possibly, I don't know. Possibly. We'll see. Okay. All righty then. What else? Well, let's see. As long as we're on the nuclear issue, this is a okay. Well, let's look at this. So this is, I guess we can segue into this somehow. Nuclear saber rattling from Trump and Putin signals a dangerous new era. Whoop. Yeah, okay. We may not make it to 2030. Oh no. Oh no. CNN. Oh no. Oh no. Okay. Okay. CNN is not going to let us see this one. All right. Nah, shame on you. All right, let's go to this one. Okay. Totally non-nuclear. Trump names Nigeria a country of particular concern, and this is because they've been slaughtering Christians left and right. Right. President Donald Trump on Friday announced he is formally designating Nigeria a country of particular concern. CPC. There you go. It has an abbreviation. That means it's a thing. Citing what he called the mass slaughter of Christians by radical Islamist militants. Christianity is facing an existential threat in Nigeria. Thousands of Christians are being killed. Trump wrote on Truth Social. Radical Islamists are responsible for this mass slaughter. I'm hereby making Nigeria a country of particular interest, but that is the least of it. And in Africa, actually, Nigeria is one of the places where we have significant activity by sanctuary blessed center families. And so we need to pray that they can be safe in God's will. Under the International, bring this up, Religious Freedom Act of 1998, a CPC designation is the United States' strongest official rebuke of religious persecutions, triggering potential sanctions, aid restrictions, or arms limits unless waived for national security reasons. Human rights groups say Nigeria's Christian communities are enduring one of the world's worst waves of religious violence, with armed militants and Fulani herdsmen attacking churches and villages across the Middle Belt. Watchdog organizations estimate that more than 7,000 Christians have been killed so far in 2025, with thousands more kidnapped or displaced. Trump noted those numbers in his post. When Christians or any such group are slaughtered like what is happening in Nigeria, 3,100, 4,476 worldwide versus, something must be done. I'm asking Congressman Riley Moore, Republican of West Virginia, together with Chairman Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma, and the House Appropriations Committee to immediately look into this matter and report back to me. The United States cannot stand by while such atrocities are happening in Nigeria, Trump added. Meanwhile, the United Nations has not issued a singular comprehensive statement specifically labeling the widespread attacks on Christians in Nigeria as genocide, but it is aware and it has signaled concern about this situation. That seems to be getting, Christians are being slaughtered in the thousands, 7,000 just this year. I don't know where Trump is getting his numbers, but watchdog organizations, okay, saying that. Okay. Nigeria's government in Abuja maintains the violence as part of broader insecurity, not religious persecution, but faith leaders and analysts say Christians are clearly being targeted for their beliefs. Trump's action follows growing calls for U.S. pressure on Nigeria's government and could restore the CPC designation that was lifted during the Biden administration. We stand ready, willing, and able to save our great Christian population around the world, Trump concluded. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, last month introduced the Nigeria Religious Freedom Accountability Act of 2025, aiming to impose sanctions on Nigerian officials who facilitate violence against Christians, enforce blasphemy laws, or fail to address Islamist extremist attacks. Nigerian Christians are being targeted and executed for their faith by Islamist terrorist groups and are being forced to submit to Sharia law and blasphemy laws across Nigeria, said Cruz in a statement. It is long past time to impose real costs on the Nigerian officials who facilitate these activities, and my Nigeria Religious Freedom Accountability Act uses new and new and existing tools to do exactly that. Excuse me. All right. So yes, we'll see how we'll have to follow this. I'll see how it develops. But let's pray for the Blessed Central families that are in Nigeria. Um, not not they're not in not um, what shall I say? Well, they're in the dozens. Let's say they're in the dozens of Blessed Central families in Nigeria. Ah, okay. And let's see what else is going on. Uh, mhm. Here it says Taiwan's armed forces expand drills in response to growing China threat. So I think we had that story, was it yesterday, in the Epoch Times about the alleged debate that's going on within the Chinese Communist Party, um, where one side is saying, "Oh, let's attack," and the other side is saying, "Well, no, let's do it with propaganda." And that in itself may be propaganda. The idea that there's a debate going on. I'm sure there are different differences in opinion, but I don't think it's the kind of thing that we're accustomed to seeing in the West, where you have Democrats and Republicans and this kind of thing. I don't think it's that way at all. Um, anyway, we'll see how this develops. Okay. And guarding U.S. banks are rushing to stock supplies amid snap lapse. Yeah, this is what I've been saying, got to do. Garner all the resources that we can. Yeah, so it's about time, isn't it? Waves of hungry Angelenos gathered outside Community Space Food Bank's storefront on a recent afternoon, grabbing dry goods like pastries, bagels, lentils, and pasta, along with refrigerated salads and frozen bags of brisket. The crowd ebbs and flows all day, says founder Gaines Newborn, but as news spread last week that the Federal Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program could cease on Saturday, he braced for the needs to dramatically increase. I've gotten more calls than we've ever gotten from concerned people saying, my food stamps are getting cut, I need a plan. People are trying to get ahead of food insecurity. But as I said, there has to be a way of getting these people off of dependency on the government. And that's where I think private charities, private welfare programs would excel. We're not just giving people food, which is what these food banks are doing. And that is certainly a valid and valuable mission that they're performing. But I don't think it should stop there. I think that there needs to be a way of helping people getting off of dependency. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Okay. China building power 10 times faster as U.S. risks losing AI edge, according to this one person. Okay. Uh, 9 things you learn on a rare train ride through North Korea, and so forth and so on. Okay, well, let's take a look at what's going on in Newsmax territory. Some of the headlines there. All right. So this whole thing with the food stamps going on. And here, Agricultural Secretary points to a chart on SNAP benefits explosion during the Biden administration. Right. So they really increased the dependence on government during the Biden administration. Mhm. And that, of course, they figure that people are dependent on the government. They're going to vote for the party that says that government should have bigger and bigger power or bigger and bigger role in people's lives. In other words, the Democrat Party. And here Trump says time to go nuclear to end government shutdown. So he said, well, he told the GOP, the Republicans in Senate, to get rid of the filibuster so that they could pass the continuing resolution with a simple majority. But the Republicans in the Senate said, no, no, we're going to do that. So the reason it's called a nuclear option is because um, that would turn sort of the history of the Senate upside down. The Senate is supposed to be a kind of a collegial body, right? And the reason that they have this rule is so that the majority cannot sort of dictate over the minority. And for most things in the Senate, there has to be 60 votes in favor before it can for it to become law. And that's where, because the Republicans have a majority right now, I think 51 or 2 or 3, something like that. They don't have 60. And so that's why this whole thing is sort of stuck right now, because they can't get those 60 votes. Some Democrats are voting with the Republicans, such as John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. He's saying government shutting down the government is always wrong. And he said it's a bad thing. And he's actually not going along with his party's instructions, and he's voting with the Republicans. And they've already voted something like 14 times, I think, but every time the Democrats shoot it down. So President Trump said, get rid of that 60 vote rule and just go with the simple majority. But that 60 vote rule, or at least the idea of a filibuster, has existed in the Senate ever since the beginning of the Republic. And so senators are very, very reluctant to go along with that. So it looks like the government shutdown will go on. And air traffic controllers also are getting paid by the federal government, and so they're not getting paid right now. And I think that's another point where we can say, well, wait a second, why are air traffic controllers getting paid by the federal government? Shouldn't, when we buy a ticket to fly, shouldn't that include some kind of uh, money that goes to the air traffic controllers, the people who help us fly? Because it already includes money for the pilots and the cabin attendants. I almost said stewardess, I'm sorry. The cabin attendants. It already includes that, right? It also includes some taxes that go to maintaining the airport. So probably, I think passengers on airplanes should also be paying for the air traffic controllers, in my opinion. And maybe this will be a good time to pursue that kind of a program. I think maybe after this is all over, right? Not immediately, but after this is all over. Yes, that will raise ticket prices, but then um, you can you can cut taxes for all of us, or at least cut the deficit, right? Because the deficit is a tax that's going to have to be paid by our descendants at some point. So either cut the taxes now or cut the deficit by cutting out the money that goes to air traffic controllers. Okay. Anyway, my idea, but no one listens. Okay. All right. All right, let's see here. Let's share this with you again. I think I'm running out of time right now, right? Less than a minute, okay. Let's see here, okay. And soybean farmer, U.S.-China deal, very encouraging, okay. Okay. There's all sorts of opinions on the filibuster. And we'll see. So it could be some pretty bad situation coming at Thanksgiving if this whole situation is not worked out by then. Okay, that looks like all for today. All right, yeah. All right, thank you for joining, and I'll see you Monday, right? Tomorrow's Sunday, so I will see you Monday. God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.